Have you ever noticed how some people cry louder at a funeral when they know there's a will involved? Like everyone's dressed in black, expensive flowers, emotional speeches about how amazing he was. But behind the scenes, while the body is still warm, siblings are already assessing the value of the house, calculating the price of the car in the garage, making snide remarks about who gets what. And look, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's literally what happened. Cynthia was at one of these funerals last week, and she said something that stuck in my head. Nobody here is really crying. Everyone's crying strategically. And man, when you stop to think about it, that's exactly it. There's crying for the audience, crying for the lawyer to see, crying to make sure everyone knows how much more you suffered than others. Grief has become a performance. Financial pain has surpassed emotional pain, and nobody has the courage to admit it out loud, while everyone pretends to be devastated. In the hallways, there's already talk about dividing assets, about who deserves more because they took better care of things, about who never cared and now wants attention. It's a macabre charade where everyone knows the script, but no one admits they're acting. And the worst part, this isn't an exception, it's the norm. Every family has this story. Every family turns into this. She's the enemy when money gets involved. And if you think things will be any different for you, well, prepare your heart, because it probably won't be. And if this is bothering you right now, leave a comment below telling us if you've ever seen this happen in your family or a close family. Seriously, no judgment. Just so we can map how many people have gone through this and realize they're not alone in this whole discomfort. Because look, this video isn't meant to teach you anything. It's just for us to look together at the pattern and admit that it exists. And if you're realizing that, this makes sense, that it matches something you've experienced or witnessed, leave a like. It's not out of ego. It's because the more people like it, the more people it reaches. And then more people realize they're not crazy for finding it strange how family becomes enemies when the subject is inheritance. And if you want to continue seeing this type of content, this type of unfiltered conversation about the patterns that everyone lives but nobody talks about, subscribe to the channel. Because here, we're not selling solutions, we're just removing the blindfold and looking at reality as it is, without romanticizing, without pretending everything is beautiful. We're building a space where we can talk about these things without having to lie that everything is all right. Now, back to the wake, because what happens there is just the beginning. The body hasn't even been buried yet, and the war has already begun, but nobody has declared it yet. Everyone is still in respect and mourning mode. But underneath it all, of the cloths. Behind the scenes, everyone already knows exactly what role they'll play in this play. And look, there's one character who always appears in this story, without fail, the favorite child. The one who has been treated like gold his whole life, as if everything he did was a source of pride, even when he didn't do anything extraordinary. And on the other side, there's the forgotten child, the one who could kill himself doing the right things, and it still wasn't enough. Cynthia once said that this dynamic is like an emotional time bomb, and man, she wasn't exaggerating. Because when the time comes for the inheritance, all that difference in treatment that lasted for decades explodes at once. The favorite looks at the situation and thinks, of course, I deserve more. I took better care of our parents, but taking better care for him means having called at Christmas, having shown up at their 80th birthday party, and having posted a photo on Instagram with an emotional caption. Meanwhile, the forgotten one, the one who was truly there, who took them to the doctor, who endured the complaints, who gave up things in their own life to be present, that one finally sees a chance to be recognized. But it's not real recognition, it's financial recognition. It's like, since you never truly loved me, at least pay me for my time. And then a war begins that isn't about money. It never was. It's about 30, 40 years of accumulated resentment. It's about all the times one was praised and the other ignored. It's about all the comparisons, all the phrases like, why aren't you more like your brother? All the decisions that favored one and harmed the other. But nobody talks about it openly. Everyone disguises it as justice. Everyone uses rational arguments. I deserve more because I did more. I deserve more because I needed less. I deserved more because I was always here. And deep down, everyone knows it's not about deserving. It's about resentment. It's about trying to compensate with money for a lifetime of emotional imbalance. And you know the worst part? There's no will in the world that can solve this. It can be written, it can be signed, it can have witnesses, it doesn't matter. Because the problem didn't start when the father died. The problem started when the father chose one son as his favorite and left the other in the shadows. And now, decades later, the two are fighting over a house, a car, the bank account, when what they really wanted was to have been loved equally. But nobody will admit that. It's easier to fight over material possessions than to admit that what really hurts is not having been chosen. And while all this is happening, the whole family watches. Cousins take sides. Uncles give their opinions. Brothers-in-law get involved. And what was supposed to be mourning becomes a reality show of emotional revenge disguised as a division of assets. The pattern repeats itself in every family, only the setting changes. Some families fight over apartments, some families fight over land, some families fight over grandma's dishes, but the essence is always the same. Nobody is fighting over the object. Everyone is fighting for validation. Everyone is trying to prove they mattered more, that they loved more, that they deserved more attention. And the inheritance becomes the battleground where you can finally measure who won this invisible competition that lasted a lifetime. If you've ever seen this happen, or if you've experienced it in some way, leave a comment. Who was the favorite? And who was the forgotten one? Because this conversation only makes sense when we admit we know both sides. And there's more. Because when you think the situation is already bad enough, an element enters the scene that transforms everything into absolute chaos. The law. And when I say the law, I'm not talking about justice. I'm talking about documents, signed papers, legal loopholes, lawyers hired even before the body cooled. Cynthia saw this firsthand. One of the brothers hired a lawyer 3 days before the funeral. 3 days. While everyone else was still choosing their black clothes, he was already choosing which law firm would destroy the family. And look, it's not an exception, it's the norm. Because the moment inheritance comes into play, everyone becomes an investigator. Everyone starts looking for evidence. A verbal promise. Valid. An email from 2003, where the mother said that one day that house would be yours. Valid. A cell phone recording of a Christmas conversation where the father, half drunk, said, "You deserved more." Valid. Everything becomes evident. Everything becomes a weapon. And then you realize something very cruel. The legal system doesn't care about feeling. It doesn't care if you spent 10 years raising the child alone. It doesn't care if you were the favorite child. It doesn't care if you gave up your life to be present. The legal system only cares about documentation, and whoever has the best documentation or the best lawyer to challenge the other's documentation wins. That's it. It's not about justice. It's not about morality. It's about who can prove it best on paper. And you know what happens? Families become memory manipulation machines. Suddenly, everyone remembers conversations that never happened. Mom promised me the house. I remember clearly, but the sibling also remembers. But they remember differently. And then a tug of war of versions of reality begins, where each one swears that their memory is the true one, that the other's is distorted, that they are lying, that they have always been manipulative, and maybe everyone is lying, or maybe no one is. Maybe memory is indeed a fragile, malleable thing that we adjust according to what we want to believe. But in court, memory is worthless. What matters is what's written, what's recorded. And if it wasn't recorded, then it's war. Wills. Torn up, contested, questioned. He was senile when he signed that. She was manipulated. He didn't know what he was doing. This has no legal validity. And you're there watching and thinking, man, does it really matter who wins? Because in the end, everyone loses. The family is already destroyed. The money will be divided among lawyers. And what's left is a bunch of people who don't speak to each other anymore, each with their share of the inheritance and zero peace of mind. But nobody gives up, because it's not about the money. It never was. It's about proving you were right. It's about winning a battle that started decades ago and never had anything to do with material possessions. It's about validation. It's about being able to look at your brother and say, I won. The system ruled in my favor. I deserved more. But the system doesn't care who deserves it. The system only wants to know who has proof. And then we reach a very uncomfortable point. Family justice doesn't exist. There is legal justice. And legal justice has nothing to do with what is right. It has to do with what can be proven. So you might have been the perfect son, the most present, the most dedicated. You don't have it documented. You lose, and you might have been the absent son, the selfish one, the one who never called. But if you have an email, a recording, a signed document, you win. That's how it works, and everyone knows it. But everyone still enters the fight, thinking that what's right will prevail. Spoiler alert, it won't. What will prevail is whoever has the best legal strategy, or the best well-documented lie. If you've ever seen a will contested because someone remembered differently the conversation, leave a comment here. I remembered differently, because that phrase sums it all up. And while the legal battle drags on, there's always someone on the outside watching, someone who shouldn't even be there, but somehow ended up becoming a central piece in this whole game. And that someone has a name, brother-in-law or sister-in-law, it doesn't matter, the pattern is the same. That person who isn't blood-related, who entered through marriage, but who suddenly is acting like they're the CFO of the operation. Cynthia saw this happen and said something that's surgically precise. A self-serving brother-in-law doesn't show up for Sunday lunch. They show up for the reading of the will. And man, that's exactly it. There are people who spent years barely greeting their mother-in-law, but on inheritance day, they're there, briefcase in hand, spreadsheet ready, legal arguments sharpened. And look, it's not that they suddenly studied law, it's that they studied the estate. They know how much everything is worth. They know where it's invested. They know what can be questioned. And the worst part, they know exactly how to manipulate the spouse. Because the game isn't open. Nobody comes and says, look, we have to get more than your sibling. No, the game is whispered, it's on the pillow, it's at breakfast. It's in those quiet conversations where your sister-in-law plants the seed. You've noticed your brother is trying to deceive you, haven't you? Or, did your sister really take such good care of your mother? Because I didn't see it. And that's where it begins. The doubt, the distrust, and that brother you loved your whole life, the one you grew up with, the one you shared a room with, secrets, childhood, that brother becomes your enemy because someone is whispering in his ear that you don't deserve it, that you're being unfair, that you've always been selfish. And you don't even know the war has begun. You only realize it when he arrives with a lawyer, when he changes his tone, when he stops answering your calls, and then you discover you're not fighting with him, you're fighting with his spouse. But he doesn't realize it. To him, he's defending what's right. To him, he's protecting his family, the new family, the one he chose, not the one he was born into. And that's when we understand a very bitter truth. Marriage can destroy blood ties. Not always, but what happens when money enters the picture? Almost always. Because loyalty changes, priorities change. And that brother who would have done anything for you 5 years ago now has someone else defining what's right and wrong. And that person has no emotional bond with, no effective memory, didn't grow up with you. For them, you're just an obstacle between their spouse and a larger inheritance. And they'll use every emotional tool available to ensure you hate each other. Because a divided brother is a controllable brother. And the worst part is, it works. Entire families are destroyed because someone from the outside came in and rearranged loyalty, and nobody admits it. Nobody says, oh, my marriage destroyed my relationship with my brother. No, everyone says, my brother changed. He became greedy. He was always like that. I just hadn't noticed. But the truth is, he didn't change. He just married someone who had other plans. If you've ever lost a brother because of a self-serving brother-in-law, leave a comment saying, marriage won, because sometimes that's what it is. Marital loyalty triumphs over fraternal loyalty, and when that happens, there's no going back. But even when in-laws aren't involved, even when it's just brother against brother, there's still an object at the center of everything that brings out the worst in everyone, and that object is always the same: the house, the family home. That old house with a leaky bathroom, with plumbing from the 70s, far from everything that nobody really wants to live in, but everyone wants to own it. Cynthia commented on this and spoke a painful truth. Nobody wants the house, everyone wants control. And that's exactly it. Because let's be honest, nobody is planning to move there. Nobody is dreaming of waking up in that house every day. Most didn't even visit when their parents were still alive. But now, suddenly, that house has become the ultimate symbol of everything. It's become the battlefield. It's become the trophy. And then the emotional theater begins. This house is our childhood. We can't sell it. There are too many memories here. But 3 seconds later, the same person who's talking about memories is already calculating. But if we sell it, how much is it worth? About 400,000 divided by 3. How much is that again? And then you realize it's not about memories. It never was. It's about equity. It's about assets. It's about having something valuable that can be negotiated, sold, turned into real money. But nobody admits it. Everyone keeps using the discourse of nostalgia. I played in this backyard. I learned to walk in this room. My mother baked cakes in this kitchen. And while everyone cries over the memories, everyone is also doing the math. Everyone is also thinking about how much they can gain by convincing others to sell, or how much they can lose if they can't keep the house. Because deep down, the house isn't about living there. It's about winning. It's about proving you mattered more. It's about being chosen. And then the siblings start offering each other money. I'll buy your share. How much do you want? As if memories had a price. As if childhood could be auctioned off. And some people accept. Some people sell. And some people stay. Not because they want to live there, but because they don't want their sibling to have it. Emotional blackmail becomes a strategy. I took better care of Mom. I deserved this house. I was the only one who truly loved this place. You abandoned us. I stayed. And when blackmail doesn't work, the threat comes. If you don't give me the house, I'll sue. I'll prove you manipulated our father. I'll contest the will to the end. And meanwhile, the house remains there, empty, decaying, leaky, overgrown with grass. No one living there, because no one really wants to live there. Everyone just wants to own it. Everyone just wants symbolic control of a place that means nothing more than market value. And you know what's saddest? The house could be sold, the money could be divided, everyone could move on with their lives. But no one does. Because the house has become the last battleground where they can still fight for their parents' love. It's become the last place where they can try to prove who was more important. And while the house rots, the family rots along with it. Because nostalgia has become a bargaining chip. Memory has become a legal argument. And in the end, no one really cares about the memory. Everyone only cares about not losing them. How many of you have fought over a house you didn't even really want? Leave a comment saying it was just equity, because deep down, it always was. And when the dust settles, when the lawyers have been paid and the fights have already happened, what remains is something even heavier: silence. And not that temporary silence, like when you fight and then after a few days you start talking again. No, it's institutionalized silence, the kind where WhatsApp groups are blocked, where Christmas ceases to exist, where birthdays become just another date, where cousins grow up without knowing each other. Cynthia described it as organized emptying. And man, that's exactly it. Because where you had family, now you have strangers. And sometimes not even polite strangers. Sometimes it's just people pretending the other doesn't exist. Phone calls, forget it. Now, it's formal emails. Dear brother, attached is the document regarding the division of assets, as if it were bank correspondence. As if they hadn't shared the same room for 15 years. And when you need to resolve something, a lawyer. Always a lawyer as an intermediary, because speaking directly would be admitting that some kind of bond still exists, and nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to give, and nobody wants to be the first to give in. So the coldness continues. Years pass, decades pass, and that relationship that was everything: brother, childhood friend, life partner, becomes a bitter memory of something that existed and was destroyed. And you know what's most ironic? When you do the math, the amount each person received in the division is ridiculous. Like if they had divided everything peacefully, each would have received about 100,000, which is nothing. Doesn't change lives. It doesn't buy freedom. It doesn't pay for the pain of losing an entire family. But the war happened anyway, and it continues to happen, because the pattern doesn't change. There are people who spent 5 years fighting over $50,000 and lost all their siblings in the process. There are people who won the house and lost their entire family. And then alone in that house, they realize it wasn't worth it. But it's too late, because pride is also part of the package. Nobody goes back. Nobody apologizes. Nobody admits they were wrong. Everyone prefers to be alone and right than together and wrong. And meanwhile, the years go by. The children grow up without knowing their uncles and aunts. The cousins become strangers. Family celebrations disappear from the calendar, and what remains is emptiness. That strange emptiness where you know you have a brother, but you don't talk to him. Where you know you have a nephew, but you've never seen him. Where you have family on paper, but no family in practice. And all because of what? Because of money? That wasn't even that much. Because of an inheritance that's already gone. Because of a fight that never had a solution. Does anyone here have a relative they no longer speak to because of inheritance? Leave a comment. Permanent silence. Because there are people who live this every day. And the worst part is, the thing is, deep down, some people even realize the arrow, but they realize it too late. Like 10 years later, 15, when the inheritance money has already been spent, already invested, already disappeared into the routine, and all that's left is emptiness. Cynthia commented on a case she saw, a guy who fought with his siblings over his father's inheritance, won the larger share, bought a new car, and 5 years later was alone at Christmas, looking at the car in the garage, realizing he had traded his entire family for an object that wasn't even worth it anymore. And then comes the remorse, that weight that won't go away, that regret that wakes you up in the middle of the night. And some try to come back. They send a message. Hi, how are you? After 10 years without speaking, as if it were possible to erase a decade of silence with a hi, how are you? As if it were possible to rebuild from nothing. And most of the time, it isn't. Because on the other side, there's crystallized resentment. You have wounded pride. You have years of accumulated resentment. And nobody forgets easily, nobody forgives easily. So the answer comes cold, polite, distant, or it doesn't even happen. And that pathetic attempt at reconciliation dies right there without a chance, because it's too late. Because some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. And then the person realizes, I lost more than I gained. The money ran out. The relationships didn't come back. And now I'm here, growing old alone, with nephews and nieces I never met, with empty holidays, with old photos that hurt to look at. And the worst part, knowing it was my fault, or the other person's fault, or both of ours. But in the end, it doesn't matter whose fault it was anymore. What matters is that it happened, and that there's no going back, because pride also ages along with it. Nobody apologized. Nobody admits they were wrong. Everyone prefers to die alone and right than to live together and vulnerable. And the pattern repeats itself. Generation after generation, there are people who saw their parents destroy themselves over inheritance, swore they would never do the same, and 10 years later are doing exactly the same thing, because it's stronger than us, because money stirs something primitive, because the promise of financial justice erases any memory of brotherly love. And when the penny drops, when the person realizes they traded decades of companionship for a few years of financial comfort that didn't even last, it's too late. Money never compensated for loneliness. It never compensated for the emptiness. It never compensated for the absence of those who truly mattered. And then all that's left is regret. That useless feeling that changes nothing, that fixes nothing, that only weighs you down. Has anyone ever tried to go back after the damage was done? Leave a comment. Too late. Because there are truths that we only understand when it's too late to reverse them. But meanwhile, a new generation is already growing up. And guess what? Which will happen when their turn comes. Exactly the same thing. Because the new generation is growing up, and Cynthia has already noticed the pattern forming again. The children of these siblings who hate each other, these cousins who barely know each other, are already entering adulthood. And you know what they're already doing? Talking about inheritance. When grandpa dies, how much do you think we'll get? Man, grandpa is still alive, still playing golf, still doing well, and the grandchildren are already doing the math. There. already planning, they're already measuring, and the worst part, they saw their parents destroy themselves over money. They saw uncles become strangers. They saw Christmases canceled, legal battles, families torn apart. And even so, they're going to do exactly the same thing, because nobody learns, nobody looks at the disaster of the previous generation and thinks, I'm not going to repeat that. Everyone looks and thinks, but with me, it will be different. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to make sure I get what's mine. And then the cycle begins again. New generation, same greed, same discourse of justice, same destruction in the end. It's so predictable, it's almost comical. Like, you already know how it's going to end before it even begins. And they know it too, but they'll go to war anyway, because human nature is pathetic and consistent. We don't change. We just repeat. And the truth that nobody wants to admit, but that Cynthia made very clear, is this. It was never about family, never. From the beginning, it was always about money. We just disguise it as love. We use pretty words like legacy, memory, justice, but deep down, it's just greed. It's just fear of losing. It's just the need to prove that we mattered more, that we deserved more, that we were worth more, and we destroy everything to prove it. We lose siblings, we lose nephews and nieces, we lose decades of companionship, we lose peace of mind, all to gain a value that, in the end, wasn't that much. After all, and while we grow old alone, counting the money we have left, the next generation is already preparing to do the same. Because the pattern doesn't break, it perpetuates itself, it adapts, but it never dies. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable truth of all. We're no better than this. We like to think we are. We like to believe that when our time comes, we'll act differently, we'll be more mature, we'll value what really matters. But statistically, we'll fight, we'll sue, we'll become enemies with those we loved most. Because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. Your children will fight over your inheritance too, right? Leave a comment, eternal cycle, because that's exactly it, a cycle that never stops. And maybe, just maybe, the only thing we can do is at least admit it, admitting that we're not immune, that we're part of the pattern, and that if we want any chance of breaking the cycle, we need to face it head on, without romanticizing it, without lying to ourselves. If you've made it this far, you probably understand that this video isn't about judging anyone. It's about recognizing what we do when no one is watching. It's about noticing the patterns we repeat even knowing they destroy everything. And if this made sense to you, if you recognized yourself at some point, or recognized someone you know, leave a comment below, writing, "I saw the cycle." Because those who made it to the end of this video aren't here by chance. They're here because they notice things, because they don't accept ready-made narratives, because they want to understand what really motivates people, even when the truth is uncomfortable. And if that's what you're looking for, subscribe to the channel, because here we don't sell solutions. We don't promise that everything will be all right. We just look at the world as it is, unfiltered, without fantasy, and try to understand why we keep doing the same things expecting different results. And if this kind of content resonated with you, leave a like. It's not out of vanity. It's because the more people this reaches, the more people realize they're not alone in this strange feeling of seeing life happen in a loop. And look, there's another video here that follows the same line, exploring other patterns we experience but pretend not to see. Click there and continue this reflection, because if there's one thing we've learned here, it's that patterns don't stop. They just change form. And the more we understand this, the less surprised we are when they reappear.